Hey guys, welcome back to another podcast. Now today we're going to be entering out our top 50 guys in the league. We got spots 50 to 41. Just really the range where I have mostly guys who have achieved so much over the past year, and that really goes as far as the team success contribution goes, and purely just star guys who are typically in that tertiary role for some of the best teams in the league. And to start this mold today, we have Ivica Zubac, who lands here to start the top 50 of our list. Clearly, one of the best starting anchors in basketball, super physical, super polished in terms of the finishing realm, the brutally stable defensive presence as well that he brings, and just someone who really just put together an extremely credible regular season last year and posed himself as one of the legitimate All-NBA candidate bigs in the NBA for a great Los Angeles Clippers squad. And in terms of this value aspect, like what we like to rank these players on, Zubac, being the productive guy that he is on both ends, ensures of his value relative to matchup. Talk about the offensive stuff through his screening value, the physical in position. Talk about the possession-based value that comes with the strengths that he brings as a post-up fulcrum. I mean, Zubac last season, 1.06 points per possession on over 4 possessions per game out of post-ups. That ranked him second most in total points as well off post-up looks, only behind Nikola Jokic. And the value with the efficiency of actual post-up possession scoring is just so valuable. I mean, especially when we are ranking the playoff resilience of these types of elite guys in the league. There simply just aren't many guys who can hold off his physical strength on the block. And in terms of how that translates to his playoff skill set, I mean, that just gives him another avenue of success that does translate to a physical offense. And with the polished shot touch as well, off his roll man touches and the cutting possessions, he's just such a super resilient basketball anchor. And this just adds to the aspects of his game that are playoff durable. And that just adds to the offensive floor that he has given this Los Angeles Clippers team for multiple years in a row. And he gives them a higher baseline compared to many of these designated anchors amongst the league because he is that much more skilled and physically gifted. Flipping to the defensive side, I think sometimes Zubac can get a little bit overrated. He isn't like the most versatile schematic big man, but obviously his superpower is being that physically absorbing drop coverage big. And that does allow him to provide a stable base for your defense. And he is currently in this situation surrounded by plus athletes. He's surrounded by rangy screen navigators. And that's where he does become much more valuable with the stable and balanced frame that he does bring, lowering his frame down. Out of guys to defend more than 15 looks a game, Zubac ranked 6th in defensive field goal percentage. And so when we are actually looking at Zubac as a rim protector, you are getting an exceptional combination between his vertical contests with the strength advantages that he does have, and that is absolutely vital in his ability to be able to throw off rhythm at the rim, and ultimately why Zu is such a stout role player. And though he does struggle fundamentally in more of those at the level coverages due to the lack of agility, the lack of general speed and higher level coordination, besides that, he still gives you a very credible baseline for your defensive floor. And for those aspects, I have Big Zu up at number 50. Now, next up, moving on to number 49, and a very high rank for one of the most glorified role players that we've seen in recent years. Someone who did have a very productive season last year, competing on a conference finalist with his overall impact as a juiced-up role player. Someone who has the agile knifing frame of that archetype defensively, but also someone who can be utilized in various avenues offensively, who provides a lot of real movement shooting talent. And for that reason why, I've got Mikal Bridges sitting here at number 49. Someone who probably can't go higher just purely because the shooting wasn't on consistent excelling display. And relative to what we've been used to throughout his entire career, obviously it was a bit of a letdown year in terms of the perimeter shot making piece. Last year, he only made 37% of his catch and shoot threes in the regular season, but that dropped to 32% come postseason time. Just really struggling to be that elite play finishing piece that the Knicks really needed him to be this season. But the thing that does keep me intrigued with Mikal is really just the diverse skill set that he brings to the table offensively as a primary jump shooter. Just in terms of the actions that you can competently have him involved in, he's extremely viable out of off-screen actions, coming off of dribble handoffs, initiating small doses of pick and roll. He's got some real post-up threat as well with the fadeaway. He can punish closeouts and be an off-ball driver as well towards the rim on open gaps. And though he isn't a great shooter by any means, I think he has done enough in this league to at least earn the reputation as one of the higher-level play finishers in the league. Someone who can run routes off-ball extremely well, and someone who has confident lift with a nice rangy over-the-top release. And to be honest, for me, I just think Mikal is a pretty strong connective passer as well and ball mover, and that does add to the pretty complete package offensively that you are getting out of your two-guard spot. Defensively is when you move on to like the strong suit for him. Yes, he wasn't exceptional last year. There was a lot of inconsistencies towards especially the start of the year, and nor is he really the most important wing defender on his team, but for me, Mikal is just still a relatively decent screen navigator, someone who can use that agile frame and recovery pop to offer some real resistance against those smaller pull-up heavy scorers. And his value on the defensive end still isn't huge at this point, and he can still struggle with those physically imposing perimeter players like we saw against Cade and Jalen Brunson, where he does struggle to maintain his balance and withstand those body blows. But overall, he has some really nice wingspan contests, and he is paired next to OG Anunoby so swiftly as a secondary point of attack defensive weapon over the past year, who can disrupt pull-up flow at the top of your release and mitigate basic advantages from pick and roll. And the reason why I do have him in this elite zone is really just the diversity that you can plug and play him with in terms of the offensive piece. And when you are rating portability amongst players, I just don't think there's many role players in the league that can really touch what Mikal can do offensively. Next up, I have Desmond Bane, someone who has been one of the most valuable tertiary options in basketball for a few years now. A tremendous shooting prospect with a fair bit to offer with the off-the-dribble stuff, with the passing, with the action initiation, and that powerful frame that he can frequently use to hunt downhill. Desmond Bane, overall, just a mightily useful and extremely portable asset as well, like leeching onto what we talked about from Mikal. Just someone who was arguably the Grizzlies' second best player, and for me was their second most impactful player last season, just with the consistency and the sustainability of his offensive approach, where he does have real leverage on the perimeter with the threat of his heating jumper. Overall, extremely efficient paint scorer, someone who is relatively selective downhill, but someone who takes extremely safe attacks when angles are opened for him, and he protects his body extremely well around the rim. He uses that frame to diminish any drawbacks that his negative wingspan does present at the rim. And in terms of the ball movement initiation piece, he's just a very useful pick and roll passer and a very healthy decision-making piece with the ball in his hands. And now he's in a situation where his gifts will be 1000% needed to succeed. And I think this season we'll really see Desmond really be able to showcase just how valuable that scorching volume shot-making impact really is. Last year, a 19-6-5 guy who just really presented some real sturdy defensive value on top of everything that he already brings you offensively. And he's quite good at physically overwhelming guys with his just general brute strength and his committed lateral efforts. And he's not insane, and he's far from destructive in terms of the defensive playmaking piece, but he plays with a requisite level of effort, intensity, and physicality, just being able to utilize that intimidating frame to offer value on the defensive end for some sort of two-way stability, which is what you absolutely need from your wings in the modern NBA today. Just an exceptionally gifted offensive ceiling raiser who does provide impact both on and off the ball at such a high level relative to his tertiary option peers. And therefore, for me, I think Desmond, though probably a down year compared to what we've seen from him in previous years, especially in terms of the injury side of things, but he ranks here at number 48, no doubt, as one of the most portable talents in the NBA in a new situation. Number 47, the Knicks get another star that's in this exact range, and for me that is OG Anunoby. Someone that I view substantially greater defensively than his counterpart, Mikal Bridges, someone who is a pretty equal offensive piece as well compared to what Mikal can bring to a team. And though he isn't as versatile due to the skill limitations than Mikal Bridges, I just think defensively, the ceiling that you are getting with the versatility is absolutely extreme. Last season, OG Anunoby gave the Knicks 18 points, 5 rebounds, 1.5 steals, and a block a game. very credible 48, 37, 81 splits out of his role, as the Knicks really just utilize OG as this powerful, occasional mismatch attacking athlete, someone who could provide some real juice off the dribble as that lower dose but highly effective and mature pull-up settler out of pick and roll. And though not absolutely efficient in isolation and nor out of post-up looks either, and that is really prevalent in his scoring toolkit, besides that, OG just presents so much events value defensively, especially in a situation where he is so heavily tasked to mightily cover for the two drastic weak points at the two most vulnerable defensive positions in basketball that the Knicks have, obviously being Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. Though he can't really compete in an everlasting switching machine, which would have OG at his best and most comfortable, obviously just considering the defensive situation he's currently in. Anunoby just does an extraordinary job fighting over and varying his screen navigation. Just an absolute powerful physical frame and a strong body that he matches with efficient movement. And that just allows him to stay within the frame against these more physical perimeter initiators. And that is really where we saw him give a guy like Cade Cunningham so many fits in that first round series. But for me, obviously, it's more the switchable powers being the calling card and the peak of his impact and talents as a basketball player. He's a guy that can contain guards so well, great balance, great general footwork out in the perimeter that allows him to contain and bait those low efficiency pull-up looks. But in terms of also that base strength and the physical combat, just allowing him to wall off with such nice mobility strengths and those great hands as well against those bigs. And so when we are reviewing the best defenders in basketball, I just don't think there are many that come better than OG Anunoby himself. Just an absolute weapon at making guys uncomfortable whilst also baiting and playing low enough to lure those shot settling tendencies from those perimeter players. And with the physical imposition playing a factor on the offensive end as well, and he's talked about with his abilities as a cutter, as a diver, as an occasional post-up guy, I just think his game is pretty intimidating. And though he is far from a high-tier scoring option and sometimes quite an unreliable spot-up piece, I just think he's one of the most specialized role talents in basketball and one of the most imposing wings in a role player cast. Now, moving on to number 46, we have one of the NBA's most adored and respected role players in basketball, who does land here, someone who has proved time and time again just how much of a star impact he really has on winning, and that is Aaron Gordon from the Denver Nuggets. AG, to me, provides similar work to OG in terms of the contributions on the margins of winning, but in terms of the separation from a guy like OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, these elite role players, you're just getting a guy who is a much more polished shot-making talent. And especially from what we saw over the past year. Last season, he reined in 44% of his threes throughout the regular season, just adding to that immense value that he contributes as an off-ball powerhouse built on timing and spacing value, both vertical and on the perimeter at this point. In terms of last season, AG gave Denver an 89th percentile spot-up option, a tremendous rebounder, one of the best vertical cutting options of this era, a plus roll man, and a transition guy who can offer plus post-up options as well as a mismatch attacking bully come playoff time. And with his defensive capabilities as a low man protector who can man the backline with leadership, physical denial and timely step-ups, I just think AG gives Denver one of the most valuable two-way players in basketball. And he was regularly assigned jobs on the perimeter, offering resistance on those powerful wings and offering real value, deterring their driving impact. That's where we saw him matched up on Kawhi Leonard and SGA, both in the playoff realm. But it's all about just the timing of his impact. And really with AG, just everything that he does just comes with high value in the most crucial times. Just huge efforts around the glass on both ends, always trying to fight for loose possessions, even against more capable athletes, and just using every piece of that mobility profile to give positive defensive roles and using his synergy with Nikola Jokic just the best he can as one of the most prolific dunker spot forwards that we've seen in the past decade. And for that type of contribution to winning in the situation that he's been in multiple years as Denver's third best star, I think it's no doubt that AG has to land here in this top 50, and he lands at 46 for me. Now, moving on to number 45, we have a true and undeniable champion here. one of the best defenders in the NBA and the best defender of our generation, still backlining and captaining some of the most polished defensive structures in basketball, and that is Draymond Green. For Draymond, he's far from polished in terms of the shot-making piece at this point, very far from polished in terms of the play finishing, in terms of the shot creation piece, and he's extremely raw as a scoring option in general. And that does bleed into his, inability to weaponize those intelligence and offensive vision strengths that he does bring to the game. And that really is the drawbacks to his game, and that does derive fully from the lack of skill that he presents at this point in his career. But in saying this, we are still talking about one of the best offensive initiating bigs in basketball. A guy who can anchor your defense at the 5 as well, but also someone who can present extremely fast-paced DHO initiation and provide extremely fast and decisive bullet reads, post entries, and off-ball screens to open up and continue to contribute to that pristine Warriors offensive system. And so we aren't just getting a sole defensive piece in this role, you are getting one of the most valuable offensive bigs in the NBA. He is, simply put, one of the smartest players in basketball and one of the best passers that we have in the game, period. And because of that, he contributes so heavily to stabilizing both ends of the floor for one of the most pristine systems in league history. Last year, we talk about the season that he's put together, just absolutely exceptional. He ranked 3rd in DPOY voting, whilst also still making that first team all defense as well. He averaged 9.6 rebounds and 6 assists with 2.5 stocks per game. But he ranked 8th in the league out of the 106 guys who have defended 750 or more shots in terms of the defensive field goal percentage. He contested the 8th most shots per game last year and also had a plus 8 point swing per cleaning the glass in terms of his impact on winning. And so by all accounts, he still contributes to winning basketball in his designated role. And you talk about the vocal leadership, the continuous communication. There is so much value that you can provide to that as a designated captain for a team, and he's the greatest intellectual defensive player of this generation and still at his best cognitively with unbeatable positioning, advantage destroying, insane recovery and rotation selection and decision making. And he may be the most flawless decision making and processing defensive guy in the league. Obviously, the playoff performance and the major regression in his offensive play finishing and just that everlasting decline in the athletic department and just the overall drop in value with his screening power because of the lack of skill, that does leave him lower on this list, despite the exceptional defensive force that he does present nightly. But besides this, we're still talking about one of the most overpowered minds in basketball. And for that, he is still a top 50 star in basketball and clearly just one of the most impactful and game-breaking defenders that we have in the NBA. Now, number 44, we have one of Philly's stars who drops in here, someone who provides electrifying and speed-bursting impact, and that is Tyrese Maxey. Someone who legitimately should be viewed as a great scorer in this league. Insane speed advantages, nimble frame, super explosive moves, and a pretty developed agility-based downhill approach. And the thing with Maxey that separates him are really just those special advantages that he does have, similar to what we've seen guys like Darius Garland and Brunson flex over the years. And that really just is the exceptional speed behind him. But also the factor in his athletic arsenal that I think can be overlooked is the actual strength that he does bring to the game in that relatively smaller frame. And I think he's coming in at 200 pounds at 6'2". And in this aspect, just having that explosive penetration and those drawback counters, that just absolutely accentuates the separation that he can attain in one-on-one coverage with the power that he can deliver to you. Now, obviously, when we're talking about these shot hunting traits, he doesn't possess any of the speed or strength to an extraordinary level that many of those top tier guys do. That's why we talk about Garland separating himself with the speed and nimbleness to the highest level in the league. We talk about Brunson separating himself with the agility and the strength to the highest level in this league. And that does hold back Maxey's overall ceiling as a small statured guard. But overall, he has an extreme base already as one of the most talented scorers in basketball. And in terms of the pull-up shooting over the past year, extremely gifted for being 24 years old. He's worked extremely hard over the years to develop this 3-level scoring versatility as a ball handler. And really just the value that Maxey brings is, compared to a lot of those pull-up heavy type of guards, he brings that high efficiency rim pressuring mindset to the game. this last season, 32% of his looks came directly at the rim. And someone that really just rarely settles within that mid-range section where those inefficient looks during the regular season can typically be sourced from. And with this lack of over-the-top size, he does understand that his cleanest looks are going to derive from the rim and on separation threes. And that's where he continues to evolve that touch in those designated areas, and why he is substantially a more sustainable scorer than a lot of these pull-up heavy guards that have ranked below him. Obviously, being a small guard in this league does deny him a lot of defensive impact, but he's someone that competes with a heavy loaded motor sufficiently where you can get by with building a cohesive defense around him, and that does separate him from many of those peers as well. There are always just things in your control defensively, and for Maxey's part, he is generally always in great position. He understands his placement on the floor. It's just that size that can really bite him, and the Sixers, however, have given him real defensive and athletic wings like PG, Kelly Oubre, Quentin Grimes, guys who can surround him and sufficiently make up for those traits that he does lack. But I do think you can build a cohesive defensive structure around him as your secondary guard. Maxey overall, just quite a large plus on the floor and someone who does present value with both the scoring diversity, but someone who does lack still polish relative to the role that he's trying to crack into, and that's why he does rank 44. And I know he's had back-to-back seasons of averaging 26 points and 6 assists. That is a truly special feat that not many can achieve, but obviously just the lack of pristine shot making, the lack of mass volume advantage creation, the limited passing windows that he can create, the ease at which teams are willing to cover his downhill creation, that does rank him at number 44. Now, number 43, I've got Julius Randle, who comes in probably a further bit down than I would have had him at the end of last season, but that doesn't come, for a reasoning of any sort of regression, but it's more of just the improvements that we've seen over the other stars in the league. Julius Randle himself lands here above these true winning DNA guys just because of the star factor that he brings to the game. And he is coming off an exceptional season, a season where he did experience a ton of real playoff success. And for that, I think Julius 100% deserves this ranking at the very least. And I think a lot of people would have him a lot higher than this number 43 placing. Regular season for Julius, 19 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists on 54% effective field goal percentage. And when you translate that to the postseason, historically for Julius, that does go in the opposite direction. But this year, we saw Randle in his own, away from injury nags and in a position to contribute, utilizing all of those physical tools that he has to express himself as a true star in this league. And we saw those numbers bump up to 22, 6, and 5 on 57% effective field goal percentage. Absolutely weaponizing the power and separation, strength, mobility, and momentum that he has in his arsenal. And when we're talking about the playoff increases, we saw spikes in Randle's isolation, pick and roll ball handling, pick and roll man, and spot up possessions all throughout last year. And especially when that jumper was coming along in real fashion, that's where we really saw the value of Randle as a playoff level ball handler. Just able to punish guys going under ball screens, but also offer that runway power. Just so much established footwork as well on the block, so many power counters in his toolbox, and that really is where he becomes impossible to deny in single coverage, especially when that shot-making piece is going at all three levels. Historically, a very capable passer who does give you the physical intimidation piece that allows him to also offer relatively average defensive value when he is locked in and engaged. But the thing with Julius that does keep him lower is, and really just becomes the motor issues and lapses in commitment that we see year in and year out. With Randle, we've seen time and time again where he loses his aggression and composure, and we saw that again in the conference finals, just having multiple stinker games where his engagement was completely out of the window, just completely uninterested in offering Minnesota value in any other department. And that is the eventual downfall that we get from Julius, especially as one of your star options on your team. Julius comes in as such an immense talent in this league, so gifted with the shot touch, the mobility, and the balance, but he just lets himself down when the game isn't going his way. And against OKC in that conference finals, where there really was no value he was offering in those pivotal games, in games 2 and 4. And so with that, I don't really want to run rampant on it, but for me, Randle can't be placed higher because of the mental inconsistency issues, and he does bring that as well as the skill issue as well, and that has been proven to bite his teams on the biggest stages year in and year out. However, in saying that, I think he's one of the most gifted offensive bigs that we have in the NBA, and for that reason, I have him ranked number 43. Now, moving on to number 42, maybe the most polarizing pick I would have on this top 100 list. I have former MVP and last year, a guy who I would have had as a top 5 player in basketball, and that is Joel Embiid. Embiid for me ranks here really just due to a multitude of factors. We talk about the lack of consistency on the court, particularly over the past 2 years. 58 games in 2 years is completely far from desired to enter into this top rank of the elite all-star level guys in this league. But adding to this, Embiid's actual last season was a major drop when considering the overall impact and the positive contribution that he brings to a team. You talk about the lack of offensive flow that he commands. He's a guy that just doesn't really generally contribute to a high-paced movement or off-ball offense like other dominant scoring anchors like we see Jokic and AD do annually. Guys who can weaponize either their passing and screening or guys that can weaponize their athleticism in both of those facets. When you generally can't integrate others around you and you kind of adopt such a narrow path to offensive creation, then you generally just don't provide much more value as an offensive anchor compared to these other guys. And we've seen for the Sixers how that does bite them come playoff time, especially when you do face unfavorable matchups. And when Embiid is struggling in one-on-one, in terms of playing those higher level defensive anchors around the league come playoff time, when you can't integrate your teammates and you can't get them and generate advantages for them as much as these other guys can, then that does bite your team when trying to generate consistent offense at the playoff level. However, though saying this, and this is just such a small flaw in Embiid's game, because we are talking about one of the guys that does stand as one of the premier talents who, without a doubt, with some more health stability and rhythm, could no doubt restamp himself again as a top-tier superstar in this league. Just the talent itself is still so staunching. You talk about the jab step leverage at the free throw line, the soft touch from everywhere on the floor, the extended range, paired with the feel, the reaction, and that anticipation for contact drawing. And with Embiid, he just brings one of the easiest recipes for offensive success, and that's where he really has weaponized his own skill set to 2 scoring titles and a 5-year stretch where he has averaged 31, 11, and 4. Just one of the best possession-based scorers in basketball. And in terms of that regular season dominance, there aren't many that still rival like Embiid and what he can do as far as that production value. He still has mobility advantage. He still provides that super powerful frame. Someone who understands how to protect his shot gather with that massive body that he has. And for the overall shot quality that he can attain at any moment, Embiid for me is clearly still a star in this league. Someone who also just has a considerably higher ceiling than most of these bigs around the league. And that's why, with all the injury concerns, he still ranks here at number 42. Now, last up, to finish today's portion, I have new certified all-star level perimeter igniter Tyler Herro, an absolute machine of value offensively, who has given Miami such immense off-ball gravity, paired with the growth that he has shown as an on-ball scorer, just with so much shot polish that now rivals some of the best in our league. Tyler Herro just ticks one of our criteria blocks to near perfection, and that is the portability in his skill set, in his playstyle, and in the tendencies that he brings. Just an elite route runner, elite movement shooter, just off-screen navigator as well, someone with exceptional mechanics on his wrist release and balance in his rise up, and just also a guy who has enough in his bag as a closeout attacker, who has exceptional angle selection, enough of an agile frame as well, and sufficient levels of pace variance to be a credible enough advantage extender. And that makes him truly an off-ball powerhouse in this league. And when you're pairing that off-ball value with the all-star level on-ball perks, you talk about 43% pull-up shooting, good enough for 7th out of 22 of the highest volume pull-up shooters in basketball. Genuinely decent enough passing chops as well, especially now that he is developing real substantial levels of gravity. Obviously nothing high level in the playmaking department, but enough to get by as your average tier regular season offensive engine. And in terms of the season that he just put together, I mean, he's a legitimate star now. I mean, 24 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists on a career best 56% effective field goal percentage, whilst also wielding that Heat offense to a capable level to give them a playoff berth behind what was an all-star campaign for Tyler. And yes, he is legitimately awful defensively and like pretty shocking athlete who doesn't lack drastically in terms of the positioning and general IQ department, but just someone that lacks the general strength, the balance, and the size, and sometimes the commitment issues. And that does really bite them come playoff time, where he was getting brutally attacked by the Cleveland Cavaliers in that first round. But in saying this, I mean, that kind of is just the general drawbacks that you are going to get from someone who does have his archetype. But just how good of a floor raiser is the next question for him. And for me, the factors that do resist him from being able to impose himself as a top tier offensive engine in the East is really just the lack of both an all-out versatile scoring skill set, but also the lack of elite passing execution and mass advantage creation capitalization. And for Herro, just the lack of rim pressure, which does come from the lack of physicality, the lack of elite speed and agility tools, that just restricts him from being this elite half-court downhill surgeon. And that inability to attain easy looks really disrupted his playoff resilience, where we did see a pretty awful first-round exit from him versus the Cavs. But though the struggles he will always exhibit as a 1A option, I just think Tyler Herro is just such a special commodity. Someone who legitimately is one of the best on and off-ball scoring talents in basketball, and someone who the Heat have gotten the absolute most out of with his elite talents in terms of just the scorching shooting piece. And on a championship team, I think Tyler's shown enough of a ceiling where he could be the third best player on a title team. And with that, we have 40 more guys to go. Let me know what you guys thought about this segment. I mean, it sounds pretty odd having a guy like Joel Embiid ranked in here with high-level role players, but I am genuinely intrigued to see how you guys think these high-level offensive stars rank against these high-level winning-based role players and what you guys value. Let us know on our page, Casual NBA Fanatic, and I'll be back with some new content very soon.